William Lawrence is a professor of politics and international affairs at George Washington University. He focuses on North African history, politics, and culture, all things on display here in Tunisia's elections. First, I want to ask you your predictions or perhaps projections after this vote on Sunday.
So we have some non-official data coming in from two polling organizations, and they are predicting a unexpected outcome. The two populist candidates, one of them currently in jail, have come first and second in the elections. The Islamist Party, whose candidate seems to have come in third, is already disputing that result, and we should know later tonight whether or not the race for the second position is closer than these unofficial polls have given. But regardless, this is an amazing result, because in this election we had 11 former ministers and 4 former either heads of state or heads of parliament competing, and the populace has rejected pretty much all of those figures and brought in 2 populist candidates with no governing experience to basically send the message that the population doesn't like anyone in the political class and wants to swap in new people.
We should note the one in jail allowed to run because he hasn't been convicted yet.
That's
but there's
right.
2 top contenders, one gathering support from the poor, another gathering support from the young. There's been an increase in registration among young voters, but still voter turnout was relatively low. Are the young not turning out?
Well, I was crunching numbers right outside the studio before I came in, because there are 2 sort of conflicting trends here. One is participation is down, but registration was up by 2 million. It was up by 30%. And so a participation of 45% with 2 million more voters is actually only a few percentage points off the 60% turnout in 2014 in terms of raw numbers. And that would explain why these candidates popular with youth are still doing well despite all this anecdotal evidence we have of not a lot of youth coming out. I think the big message is that young people and people in poor areas wanted a clean slate, wanted to get rid of the candidates that represent the establishment, and even if the turnout wasn't that high among youth, it was high enough to bump off these establishment figures.
After the deadly terrorist attacks, we saw an alliance between Essebsi and the Ennahda party, the moderate Islamist Muslim Brotherhood faction there, the basis of the Carthage pact. What sort of alliances will we see now that that pact is effectively expired?
Well, that's probably the most important question for the long term in Tunisia, because what we had in Tunisia was not a revolution. We had what political scientists call a pacted transition, where different large factions agree not to go after each other, or as I sometimes say, keep each other out of jail during the transition and decide to cooperate together and move forward. And that pact fell apart about 1 year ago this month. And that bodes very badly for the long term, because if either side in the political spectrum goes for a zero-sum type result, we could have a bad outcome like Egypt or like some of the other Arab Spring countries where one side forces the other side guys out. Now, it's interesting, these populist candidates were with neither side. So we could contemplate right now a populist president and a divided parliament where things could either get a lot worse and more confrontational, or they'll come up with a new pact, a new coalition to confront the populist president, sort of that type of outcome.
Tunisia is often hailed as the success of the so-called Arab Spring, and this was really remarkable to see presidential debates on television live in the Arab world. Why do you think this country has achieved so much where so many others maybe have failed?
Well, there's many theories on this and whole books written on the Tunisian exception. But I think the most important aspect we were just talking about, which was the consensus among leaders to have a 90% and not a 51% solution at each stage in the transition process. So, for example, when they passed their landmark constitution in 2014, over 90% of the members of the Constituent Assembly had to sign off on it, and that meant much more of a consensus document. And that consensus till now has protected the democratic transition.
Zine al-Abidine Ben Ali is in exile. He's reportedly very sick. It's been suggested that he might be allowed to return home really quickly. Do you think that might have an effect on any?
And in fact, the woman who represents sort of the Ben Ali side of things did very badly in the election. And so this idea that Tunisians want to go back to the past, I think, is not true.
All right. Thank you so much, William Lawrence. William Lawrence from George Washington University. Thank you for joining us. I apologize for messing up your name there.